Hey there. When you think about the history of medicine, it's easy to picture it as just a series of random, lucky breakthroughs. But what if it wasn't random at all? Today, we're going to look at it as a logical unlocking of one puzzle after another, where each discovery was pretty much the only key that could open the very next door.
So let's just jump right in with a question that sounds, well, kind of silly today. Why don't we blame demons when we get the flu? I know, it sounds ridiculous, but for most of human history, that was a perfectly reasonable explanation. The journey from that idea to your doctor's office today, well, that's the incredible story we're diving into.
So here's the main idea, the big takeaway for this whole thing. The history of medicine really couldn't have happened in any other order. I mean, think about it. You can't possibly find a cure for a bacterial infection before you even know bacteria exist, right? It's all an interconnected chain, like a series of dominoes that had to fall in a very specific sequence. So let's go back and knock over the very first one. The first puzzle was the most fundamental of all. What actually makes us sick? For thousands and thousands of years, the answer wasn't looked for inside our bodies, but somewhere out there, in the supernatural world. Okay, so this right here, this is the first huge shift in human thinking. Just look at these two columns. We went from blaming everything on external supernatural forces, angry gods, evil spirits, which meant you needed rituals and prayers to fix it, to looking for a natural cause inside the body. All of a sudden, the problem wasn't a curse, it was an imbalance. And that was the moment medicine really began its move from the temple to the clinic. And that search for an internal cause led to one of the most influential and longest-lasting theories in history, the four humors. For almost 2,000 years, this was medicine. And yeah, it was completely wrong, but you can see the logic, can't you? It's actually pretty clever. If you had a fever, you felt hot and wet. Well, look at the chart. That's an excess of blood. So what's the treatment? Bleeding, of course. It made perfect, logical sense based on what they knew.
But here's the problem. Trying to fix these imbalances without knowing how the body was actually put together, that's like trying to fix a car engine without a blueprint. It's just not going to work. So to move forward, medicine desperately needed a map. It needed a detailed guide to the human body itself. For centuries, everyone just followed the work of the ancient physician Galen. But the thing is, because of taboos around human dissection, his so-called human anatomy was based on dissecting animals, mostly apes and pigs. He even described things in humans like a rete mirabile, this complex network of blood vessels that we just don't have. It took until the 1500s for this guy, Andreas Vesalius, to do something truly radical. He actually dissected human bodies and decided to trust what he saw with his own two eyes instead of what some ancient book told him. And his masterpiece, a book called the Fabrica, gave medicine its first ever reliable map of the human body, correcting hundreds of years of errors. And this wasn't just some textbook. It was the absolute foundation for everything that came next. Because at the end of the day, you can't fix a machine if you don't even know where the parts are. So, okay, medicine now has a map, but solving that puzzle just unlocked an even deeper one. What was this invisible thing that could make the whole incredibly complex machine of the body just grind to a halt? The answer, it turned out, was in a world no one had even seen before. Right? Thanks to Vesalius, you could see all the parts. You could understand how things were supposed to work. But what was the actual cause of the terrible plagues and infections that would just wipe out huge parts of the population? What was the missing piece? Well, the answer didn't just appear overnight. It was a slow, step-by-step process. It starts way back in 1676 with a guy named Leeuwenhoek, who sees these tiny little animals in a drop of water with his new microscope. He has no idea what they are. Then it takes almost 200 years for Louis Pasteur to prove these things don't just magically appear out of nowhere. And finally, Robert Koch comes along and delivers the knockout blow. And he did it with this is just brilliant, Koch's postulates. Think of it like a scientific recipe or a detective's checklist that finally proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that one specific germ causes one specific disease. This was it. The age of blaming infections on bad air or unbalanced tumors was officially over. All right, so you can probably start to see how all these different pieces are clicking together now. We've got an accurate map of the body, and now we understand the true enemy, these invisible germs. The stage was finally set for one of the most dramatic leaps in medicine, modern surgery. It's really hard for us to even wrap our heads around this now, but before this time, surgery was just sheer terror. It was a brutal, frantic race against unimaginable pain and almost always a deadly infection afterwards. The best surgeons weren't the most careful ones, they were the fastest. We're talking about amputating a leg in under a minute while people held the patient down. But then, a surgeon named Joseph Lister read Pasteur's work about germs, and he had a light bulb moment. He thought, what if? What if we kill the germs on the wound before they get in? He started using carbolic acid as an antiseptic, and the results? I mean, just look at this. The death rate from his amputations plummeted from a horrifying 45% down to 15%. This was the game changer. And this is so important to get. Safe, modern surgery wasn't because of one single discovery. It was only possible when three separate, absolutely essential puzzle pieces all came together at the same time.
First, you absolutely had to have anatomy. Without that reliable map from Vesalius, any kind of complex surgery was basically just guesswork. Second, you needed anesthesia. The discovery of things like ether and chloroform was the conquest of pain. And for the first time ever, surgeons could actually take their time. They could be slow, careful, precise. Speed wasn't the main skill anymore. And third, you needed antisepsis, the conquest of infection. And this came directly from Pasteur's germ theory. Because it didn't matter how skilled you were as a surgeon if your patient just died from a raging infection a few days later. This was the final piece of the puzzle. And this brings us right back to where we started. When you look at it this way, you can see the whole history of medicine just unfolds. It's a necessary sequence, a cascade, where each answer reveals the next question that needs to be solved. Think about the chain reaction here. Without an accurate map of the body, without anatomy, surgery is little more than butchery. And without the invention of the microscope, the very concept of a germ theory would have been pure science fiction. An interesting idea, sure, but you could never prove it. And of course, without understanding that specific germs cause specific diseases, you could never, ever develop antiseptics to kill them or create modern vaccines to prevent them in the first place. You just couldn't skip a step. Each piece was absolutely essential for the one that followed. So what this really shows us is that progress isn't just about a few brilliant people having lucky ideas. It's about having the right tools and the right knowledge already in place for those brilliant people to build on. And that leaves us with one last pretty exciting question, doesn't it? What invisible puzzles are we trying to solve right now? Things like our own genetic code, the mysteries of the brain, the universe inside our gut bacteria? What are we just now building the tools to finally see, setting the stage for the next inevitable breakthrough?